All right, Shabbat Shalom, everyone. We are still one person short a minion. However, we will stall a little bit if need be to when we get to the Torah service. Bob is going to lead us in Mincha, which begins on page 214, or if you're in Sidur Sim Shalom, page 252. I'll use the Sidur. No, I can't.
Ashrei Yoshevetecha Od Yalucha Salach. Tila liyada bepi v'avrach kabosar shem kachel elam v'ed v'anachnu nevarech hamietav yad olam. Hallelujah. Uval etzion gelu shevi v'niv zimri l'mamaron ha'rechi asher alam v'varav v'yad olam v'ata kadosh yoshev tilad l'Yisrael v'karazeh al zeh v'yamar Kadosh, 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 Nights above, Malachas Kavod, V'tisaini Ruach V'shmachare Korash Kadol Baruch Kavod Adonai Mim Kamo Adonai Yimlach Le'alam Va'ed V'yivtechu v'cha yodei shemecha Ki lo azavta Dorshecha Adonai Ra'ech Hafez L'man Tzidko Yagdil Torah V'yadir Igarav Igara Shemei Rapa B'yamad Divrachute V'amlich Machute V'chayechon V'yamecha D'chol Yisra B'agala Bizman Kari V'yamru Amen Yesh me ram rakle la mo me amaya ibrach vishtabach vipar vidman nease vidar vida levi ala shme du kedesha brihu leila min kol bechata v'shir atafetish bechata v'nachmata dami ram bi'ama v'yamru amen. Vayehi ben Saran, Vayomer Moshe, Kuma Adonai, Ve'afutsu Oivecha, Ve'anisu Mesanecha Mipanecha, Ki Metzion Teitze Torah, Ki Metzion Baruch Shenatan Torah Torah Le'amo Yisrael B'kedunu Shato Gavu Ladonai Tin Ramama Shemo Yachdav Lecha Adonai Hagedula
V'hagevura v'atifer v'anetzach
Ve'anetzach Ve'ahod Kicho Bashamayim U'Ba'aretz Kicho Bashamayim U'Ba'aretz Adonai B'mamacha Yamid Naseh L'chol Erosh Ramemu Adonai Eloheinu V'ishtachave V'ishtachadu V'hadam Ravav Kadoshu Ramemu Adonai Eloheinu וישתחוו להר קודשו כי קדוש אדוני אלוהינו.
I should be pretty close because that's what we use this morning. It's already told out. It's heavy. There we go. Good. All right. We are in Parshat Chaye Sarah, which can be found on page 127 in your Chumash. One of the really nice things about when we're reading the third triennial during Shabbat morning services is that if you come to morning minyan or if you come to Shabbat Mincha, you get the beginning. So you're getting the beginning of the story and the end of the story if you come both to daily readings and also to Shabbat. So that's what we're going to be doing here, reading the beginning of Chaye Sarah. And no one gave out aliyot, right? Okay, so I'm just going to call up people to receive aliyot. Unless, does anybody want an aliyah? Just raise your hand if you would like an aliyah. Do you want to come first? יצחק
שמואל ומרים.
בן שמואל ומרים ראשון ברוש נתן תורה למעשה בקדושתו.
ואתם מרקים עליכם חייקים היום.
ואתם מרקים עליכם חייכם היום.
ברכו את אדוני המבורך.
ברוך אני ברך לעולם ועד.
ברוך אדוני המבורך לעולם ועד. ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו מלך העולם אשר בחר בנו מכל העמים ונתן לנו את תורתו. ברוך אתה אדוני נותן התורה.
אמן. ויהיו חיי שרה 100 שנה ו20 שנה ו7 שנים שני חיי שרה ותמות שרה בקריית ארבע היא חברון בארץ כנען ויבוא אברהם לספוד לשרה ולבכותה ויקום אברהם מעל פני מתו וידבר אל בני החת לאמור גר ותושב אנוכי עמכם תנו לי אחוזת קבר עמכם ואקברה מתים מלפני ויענו בני חת את אברהם לאמור לו שמענו אדוני נשיא אלוהים אתה בתוכנו במבחר קברנו קבור את מתך איש ממנו את קברו לא יכלה ממך מקבור מתך ויקום אברהם וישלח עולם הארץ לפני חטא.
ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו מלך העולם אשר נתן לנו תורת אמת וחיי עולם נטע בתוכנו. ברוך אתה אדוני נותן התורה.
Amen. Julia, you want to aliyah? Ta'amud. I can hear you. Yochel v'nurit. Bar Avraham v'Sara l'aliyah sheni. The second aliyah is verse 8. Page 128.
Here we go, right at the very top.
ברכו את אדוני המבורך.
ברוך אני ברך לעולם ועד.
ברוך אדוני המבורך לעולם ועד. ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו מלך העולם אשר בחר בנו מכל העמים ונתן לנו את תורתו. ברוך אתה אדוני נותן התורה.
Amen.
וידבר איתם לאמור אם יש את נפשכם לגבור את מתים מלפני שמעוני ופיגעו לי בעפרון בן סוכר ויתן לי את מערת המכפלה אשר לו אשר בקצה שדהו בכסף מלא יתננה לי בתוככם לאחוזת קבר ועפרון יושב בתוך בני חת ויען עפרון החיתי את אברהם באוזני בני חטא, וכל בישרי רולי מוהור, לא אדוני שמעני, השדה נתתי לך, והמרעה אשר בו לך נתתיה, לעיני בני עמי נתתיה לך כבור מתך, וישתחו אברהם לפני עם הארץ, בני עם הארץ.
ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו מלך העולם אשר נתן לנו תורת אמת וחיי עולם נטע בתוכנו. ברוך אתה אדוני נותן התורה.
Verse 13, page 129.
Baruch hu Adonai HaMevorach. Baruch Adonai HaMevorach Le'olam Va'ed. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher bocher banu mikol ha'amim, v'natan lanu et torato. Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah.
Amen. וידבר אל עפרון באוזני עם הארץ לאמור, אך אם אתה לא שמעני, נתתי כסף השדה, קח ממני, וקברת מתי שמה, ויען עפרון את אברהם, לאמור לו, אדוני שמעני, ארץ 400 שקל כסף ביני ובינך, מהי, ואת מיתך כבור, וישמע אברהם אל עפרון, וישקול אברהם לעפרון את הכסף אשר דיבר באוזני בני חטא, 400 שקל כסף עובר לסוחר.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher natan lanu torat emet, v'chayei lanotah betochenu. Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah.
Amen.
Is anybody feeling extra strong, especially in your left hand? Gary, all right. People do so, please rise for the lifting and wrapping of the Sefer Torah. I will definitely spot you. I will bring the chair super close. You can just lift up and get sit down. וזאת התורה אשר שם משה לפני בני ישראל על פי אדוני ביד משה. עץ חיים היא למחזיקים בה ותומכי המאושר. עץ חיים היא למחזיקים בה ותומכי המאושר. דרכי נועם לכל נתיבותיה שלום. דרכי נועם לכל נתיבותיה שלום. Today and in need of El Male? No? Okay. We'll continue with the Torah service. Actually, let me ask on Zoom. Is there anybody on Zoom who's in need of an El Male who has a yard site today? Okay. We'll continue with the Torah service on page 221.
Hallelujah, Shem Adonai, Kinis Kav Shemo Levato, Hodo al Eretz, V'shamayim, Vayarem Keren Ve'amo, Kila Lecha Chasidav, V'vnei Yisrael Am Karova. Hallelujah, Hallelujah. Adonai. Adonai haaretz umlala, tevev yeshveva ki hoyamim yesata, ve'anarod lechonaneha, Mi'ale bahar Adonai. Umiyakum bimkom kodsho. Naki kafai muvar levav. Asher lo nasala shav nafshi. Velo nishba lemirma. Isa bracha me'et Adonai. Utzakam Elohei Yisho Zedor Dor Shavmak Shepanecha Yaakov Sela Su Shearim Rashechem V'hinasu Pitche Ola Ve'avo Melech HaKavod Mize Melech HaKavod Adonai Yizus Gilchagor Adonai Kibor Melchama Shearim Rashechem Usu Pitche Olam Ve'avo Melech HaKavod Mihuza Melech HaKavod Adonai כי לכך טוב נתתי לכם תורתי, אל תעזבו את חיים היא, למחזיקים בה, ותומכיה מיושר, דרכיה, דרכי נועם, וכל מטיבותיה, שלום. Shivenu Adonai Elecha v'nashuva Chadesh Chadesh Yameinu Chadesh Yameinu Kekedem.
We'll continue with Chatzi Kaddish, which will go into the whispered Amidah on page 223.
Ikadav, Ikadash Merabah, Bi'amadi V'rakirute, V'yamlich Malchute, V'chayechon V'yomechon, V'chayedecho Beit Yisrael, Bagala, Bagala, Uvizman Kariv Imeru, Amen. Yishmei Rabba Mevorach, Le'olam Lame'omaya, Yiparach, Yiparach, V'yishtabach, V'yitpa'ar, V'yitramam, V'yitnaseh, V'yithadar, V'yitalev, V'yithalash, Shmei Kedusha, B'richu, Le'elam, Min Kol Berchata V'shirata, Tushbechata V'nechemata, Damiram B'yama V'yimeru, Amen.
There we go. If you have not yet finished your Amidah, please continue at your own pace. Bob will begin the Amidah for us on page 223, and then we'll join together with him for the Kedusha on page 225.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu v'Elohei Avotenu Elohei Abraham, Elohei Yitzhak, Elohei Yaakov, Elohei Sarah, Elohei Rivka, Elohei Rachel, Elohei Leah, El HaGadol, HaGibor v'Anora, El Elyon, Chomel Chasadim Tovim v'Kanei HaKov, Zocher Chastei Avod, Umevi Goel Livnei v'Nehem L'man Shemo B'Ava, Melech Ozer Moshe, Uvoked Moshe Magen, Baruch atah Adonai, Magen Abraham Uvoked Sarah, Atah Gibor Le'olam Adonai, Mechayim Itim Atah V'Loshia, V'chalkel Chaim Chesed, Mashiv Aruach Amrita Gashan, V'chalkel Chaim Chesed, V'chayim Itim V'rachamim Rabim, Samech Nafim V'rfei Cholim Matei Aserim, U'kayem Emunatah L'shnei Afar, Michamocha Bal Gavrot, U'midah Melach, Melech Meimit, U'mchayim Matzmiach Yeshua, V'leman Atah L'chayot Metim, Baruch atah Adonai, Mechayei HaMetim. Kadesh Shemcha Be'olam, Kishem Shemakti Shemata B'Shmei Maram, Kakatuv Ayadim Ve'acha, Bekarze El Zevi Amar. Kadosh, 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 Adonai Tzvaot, Melech Haaretz Kavodo, Le'matam Baruch Yomeru. Baruch Yavad Adonai Mimkomod, V'rei Kodechecha Katuv Le'mor. Imlochen Elam Loxion Ladavator, Hallelujah, Ladavator Nagiga Lech, Al Netzach Nitzachim to Hanakdish, Vashivchacha Elohim Mubhino Lo Yamush, Le'elam Va'ed, Kiel Melech Kadosh Kadosh, Ata Baruch Atah Adonai, Ha'el HaKadosh, Atah Checha V'Shimcha Echad, Mikam Mecha Yisrael Goyecha Ba'aretz, Fer Kedulav Yatah Yeshua, Yamenucha V'Kedusha Lamcha Natata, Abraham Yagel Yitzchak Yiranen, Yaakov V'Avianu Chuva, Menuchat Hava Dava, Menuchat Emet V'Emunah, Menunat Shalom V'Shalom Shalv Ashked V'Etech, Menuchat Shlema Shata Rotze Ba, Yakiru V'Necha, V'Eitu Ki Mitcha Hi Menuchatam V'Amenuchatam, Kadish Et Shmecha, Eloheinu v'Elohei Avotenu, Ritzei Minukatenu, Kachin Tzvatecha, V'tein Chalkeinu B'Toratecha, Sabeinu Mitivecha, V'samcheinu B'Yeshuatecha, V'ater Libeinu Le'avdecha Be'amet, V'anichilenu Adonai Eloheinu, V'avav Ratzon Shabbat Kachecha, V'ayinucha V'Yisrael Mikadesh Shemecha, Baruch atah Adonai Mikadesh HaShabbat, Ritzei Adonai Eloheinu, B'Amcha Yisrael Tfilatam, V'ashef et Avodah Lidveretecha, Tfilatam B'Avad Tekabel B'Ratzon, Util Ratzon, Tamid Avodat Yisrael Amecha. Zeni Ani B'Shcha L'Tzion B'Rachamim, Baruch atah Adonai, Hamachazir Shechinato L'Tzion. Atov Kilcha Rachamecha, V'Amrachem Kilutam Chazadecha, Kivenu Lach. V'Yakol Am Yiparach Midromam, Shemcha Makinu Tamid Le'olam Va'ed, V'Kol Chachayim Yidu Chasela, V'Yalu Et Shemcha B'Amet, Ha'el Yishvenu V'Ezratenu Sela, Baruch atah Adonai, Ha'tov Shemcha Uchane Le'hodot. Shalom Rav al Yisrael Amcha, V'al Yoshvei Tevel Yetashim D'Olam, Ki Atahu Melech Adon, V'chol HaShalom, V'tov B'nech Levarach Et Amcha Yisrael, V'chol Eid V'chol B'Yishlomecha, Baruch atah Adonai, Barech Et Amo Yisrael V'Shalom.
Top of page 230.
Tzidkat Tzedek Le'olam, Torcha Emed. Adam Hema Toshia Adonai. Igaravi Krashem Rabba, Be'amad Brakirite, Be'amlich Machute, V'chayechon, Be'amechon, V'chayedecho Be'Yisrael, V'agalaz Mankari, V'emru, Amen. Yehesh me rabba me varach le'lamo me amaya yiprach v'ishtabach v'yipar v'yitruman v'yitnaseh v'yidadar v'yidale v'yidalash medu kedusha briru le'ela mikol birchata v'shirata tishbachata v'nechemata damiram b'yama v'yimru amen tikabel zon v'hon d'cho Yisrael kadam uvahon divishmaya v'yimru amen Yehesh lama rabba min shamaya v'chaim aleni v'akol Yisrael v'yimru amen Aseh shalom biramamav, hu yaseh shalom. Avenu v'yakol Yisrael v'yemru. Amen.
Alenu, page 231.
Alenu l'shabeach l'adon hakol, l'tekidulah liotzev reshit, shelo asan gegoye haratzot, velo samanu kemishpachot hadamam, shelo sam chalkeinu kahem, v'gor alenu kechol hamonam. אנחנו קוראים ומשתחווים ומודים לפני מלך מלכי המלכים הקדוש ברוך הוא. ככתוב בתורתך, אדוני ימלך לעולם ועד, ונאמר והיה אדוני למלך על כל הארץ, ביום ההוא יהיה אדוני אחד ושמו אחד.
Mourner's Kaddish, page 232.
יתגדל ויתקדש שמי רבה.
Amen.
ויעמד דברך קירתי וימליך מלכותי בחיי חון ובימי חון ובחיי דכל בית ישראל. בעגלה ובזמן קריב ויאמרו אמן. שמי רבה מברך לעולם ומי עמיה. יתברך וישתבח ויתפאר ויתרומם ויתנשא ויתהדר ויתעלה ויתהלל שמי דקדושה בריחו. Le'ela min kol birchata v'shirata, tushbechata v'nechemata, damiran bi'alma v'imru amen. Yehi shlama rabba min shemaya, v'chaim alenu v'al kol Yisrael v'imru amen. Oseh shalom b'mramav, huya aseh shalom, alenu v'al kol Yisrael v'imru amen.
Amen. Yasher Koach to bow on a beautiful mincha and to stand for reading Torah for us, also beautiful. We are going to now nosh for a little bit as Julia teaches us some what I'm sure will be very fascinating poetry. We ask that you have your mask on while you go to get food, just because then you're not breathing all over food that other people are going to take. So as you go up to get food, please remain masked. And then obviously when you come back to your seat, you can unmask to eat. I won't make you eat masked. And we'll do that for just a few minutes. And then Julia will come up here and lead us in some teaching. We'll have you stay in your seats just so that we can make sure that we're still speaking to those on Zoom and live stream. And we'll see you in just a moment. Yes. There's also one on the computer, but if you want to use mine, you can.
Yeah, you said 20 minutes.
Yeah, so I would say so they're gonna grab food and then they can eat for just a few minutes. Like let them like kind of get started eating and then you can start. I would say end by 6:15, which actually we went pretty fast today, so you have some time.
6:15
because then we'll do Birkat and then we'll do Mariv. So yeah. I made 20 copies, so we should be actually exactly right.
Right.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, of course. My pleasure. Well, thank you.
Thank you.
It's possible that we'll lose a few people. Some people don't stay for
That's
Mariv.
okay.
So.
I won't be offended.
Yeah. No, yeah, definitely.
It's also cold. Like,
So
where are
cold.
we?
I know.
On the East Coast?
I know. Yeah, it's true. It's true. I wanna. Oh, he left. I have to prepare for this wedding, and I might just stay here after this. seen a member of that family while I'm there, just to like they have something for me to pick up, so I'm gonna pick some food. But yeah, that's right in memory. Yeah. One of my best friends lives there and just had a baby, so I'm gonna get to see her, which is really nice. So that'll, you know, yeah, I get to have a little bit of fun even though I'm working. Yeah. But weddings are good. I'm gonna be dressed up more than I've been dressed up in a long time though.
It's beginning to be really normal.
To be dressed up.
Yeah, to get like.
I just haven't been in like a black tie dress in
Oh well, no,
summertime.
That's no, just like in like.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, dressed all the way,
Like,
not just the top of the
all.
yeah. I noticed the other day I went to go grab a sweater and I was like, oh, I used to wear all the sweaters all the time because I used to just be, you know, at home with whatever pants I wanted. And
It wasn't too bad.
no, it was great. It was something nice. I really liked it. Yeah. Didn't matter if I matched on the bottom. I could just wear tops. It's great.
So we don't have. I could have looked at the date here, and it was too late. Like we don't really have a specific rotation, right? Are we doing this every third Saturday?
I don't remember which date it's
It's not established, right? Because someone asked me this morning, and I was like,
I don't remember. Yeah.
no, I was just thinking at the end of the day, telling people.
Yeah, it's on the website. So definitely tell them to check the dates that you're doing. Yeah, you can say what them.
How is it so far? It's winding down.
Yeah.
How was this morning? I was over there.
Great. I was upstairs. Erica brought me a really great sermon. I'm teaching a class on the Handmaid
Should I start? Okay, great.
All right, please continue eating, and obviously, if you would like to get more food, please feel free to do so. Um, so Julia's going to introduce what she's teaching. I just want to point out that one of the things that's really wonderful about this new program that we're doing for our rabbinical students, which we're calling our rabbinic residents, is that instead of just giving them general internship experience, we are allowing our residents to choose the things that they are really interested in exploring. So whether that's davening or teaching or working with conversion students or what have you, each of our residents is really kind of honing in on specific aspects of their rabbinate as opposed to just a general internship. It's something that we're trying new this year, and obviously we will enjoy your feedback and their feedback, of course, when the residency, when the internship is over. So for Julia, Julia is a poet. Julia studies poetry, and Julia is someone who knows more about poetry than any of the clergy combined. And so part of her residency is bringing that acumen to our synagogue, to our community. So she's going to be doing this once a month for a few months. So every time that she's on for Sudash Lishit, you can expect to learn a little bit more poetry from Julia. And so either you should come every Sudash Lishit, enjoy whoever's teaching, or if you enjoy her teaching specifically, make sure that you look at the bulletin to come when Julia is on. So I'm going to let her introduce her teaching, but I wanted to make sure that everybody knew that moving forward. Yeah, of course.
Thank you. Thanks for coming. So I thought that we were going to look at one or two poems every time that I'm teaching, and I thought, what better poet to start such a series of than Nahman Bialik, who is considered the foremost modern Hebrew poet. And obviously, we're having like until 6:15-ish, so can't do him justice, but I still want to like say like a few words. So he was born in 1873 in Russia. He settled in Tel Aviv in 1924, and he died in Vienna in 1934. One of the reasons why he is considered the national Hebrew poet is because he used the language in new ways. The forms that he was writing in were actually still quite old or traditional, but the way he brought the language to life and used it in his poems was a new way. He also, when he was using biblical quotes, which he did a lot, he had a very good yeshiva education, so he really knew a lot. He wouldn't use them in like a way the Psalms do that in terms of supportive, positive statements, and rather he took them out of the context and used them often to express some sort of despair, I want to say, or sadness or pessimism, which is actually interesting that he would do that so often, because you might think the person who is considered the foremost national Hebrew poet is a person, and who was also a Zionist, is going to be someone who is full of hope and optimism. And the fact is that a lot of people wanted that from him, wanted him to be that, but he actually wasn't. A lot of his poems, also the two, especially the first we're going to look at, and we're going to focus on the first one, on Levadi, expresses rather anything between disenchantment and sadness and grief and loss, and he struggled with this for a long time. One of the reasons why he was so pessimistic often and grieving was obviously because of the overall situation of European Jewry. One of his famous poems, In the City of Slaughter, was composed in 1904, just a year after the pogrom in Kishinev, and he has many others of that. But the other thing that really was dominant in his life was that he had this very intense religious education, and he lost the religion lost its meaning for him very early on, actually, in his life. And even though he never found his way back to it, but he stayed with it. And what definitely stayed with him was the grief about having lost that. and not only in his own life, but he saw how a lot of Jewry abandoned the faith and how it didn't make meaning, wasn't meaningful to them. And another irony in a way is that when he settled in Palestine, he it didn't revive his creativity or his spirits in a positive way. It was rather that he was still tied to Europe in his spirits and in his moods and in his influence, obviously. And so he is the foremost modern Hebrew poet, but and maybe it is in the language, and it is also in our culture in some way, this balance between hope and disenchantment and pessimism. But he continued, and I think I chose this poem that I brought because it expresses so much of what I just said, and also because I won't always do this, but I'll try to have poems that in one way or the other make a reference to the parsha that we've either been in, which is in our case Vayera, or in a way foreshadow maybe the parsha that is coming. Both poems actually do this to some extent, and yes, I also want to apologize. The translation, especially of Levadi, isn't the best. I had seen one or two things that I didn't like, but only after sending the sheet did I realize just how incomplete it actually is. So for those of you who have a good command of Hebrew, I suggest you look at the Hebrew. And I brought another translation that is not a poetic translation, but it's a content-based translation that might be interesting and actually quite interesting to just listen to. So what I'm going to do, before I read the poem, I want to bring your attention to what I think are three main themes or motives in this poem that I roughly call: one, loneliness; the second one would be pain and grief; and the other one is some sort of intimacy and tenderness. And as you either follow along on the not so great English translation or in the Hebrew, maybe keep those in mind, and if you find a line that speaks to one of them, we can talk about that when we're done. So I'm going to read this in the English, in the Hebrew. Levadi. כולם נשא הרוח, כולם סחב האור, שירה חדשה את בוקר, חייהם הרנינה, ואני גוזל רך, נשתכחתי מלב. I need to put this up. מלב, תחת כנפי השכינה, בדד נשארתי, והשכינה אף היא, כנב ימינה השבורה, על ראשי הרעידה. ידע ליבי את ליבה, הרדה עליי, על בנה, על יחידה. קבע נתגרשה מכל הזוויות, רק עוד פינת סתר שוממה וקטנה נשארה, בית המדרש, ותתכס בצל, והיא עמה יחד בצרה. וכשקלה לבבי לחלון לאור, וכשצר לי המקום מתחת לכנפה, כבשה ראשה בכתפי, ודמעתה על דף גמרתי נטפה. חרש בכתה עליי, ותתרפק עליי, וכמו שחה בכנפה השבורה בעדי. כולם נשא הרוח, כולם פרחו להם, ויוותר לבדי. ובכן סיום של קינה עתיקה מאוד, וכאין תפילה, בקשה וחרדה כאחד. שמעה אוזני babicha hacharishit hahi uvadim'a hahi harochata. I am going to read what this book, which is amazing. If you don't know it yet, it's a wonderful reader with a great collection of modern Hebrew poetry. It is called The Modern Hebrew Poem Itself. So it's fantastic. I'm going to just quickly read what they write in English. Alone. The wind carried all of them away. The light swept all of them away. A new song made the morning of their lives exult with song. And I, a soft fledgling, was completely forgotten under the wings of the Shekhinah. Solitary, solitary I remained, and the Shekhinah too. She fluttered her broken right wing over my head. My heart knew her heart. She trembled with anxiety over me, over her son, over her only son. She has already been driven away from every corner. Only one hidden nook, desolate and small, remained, the house of study. And she covered herself with the shadow, and I was together with her, sharing in the distress. And when my heart yearned for the window, for the light, and when the place under her wing was too narrow for me, she hid her head in my shoulder, and her tear dropped on my Talmud page. Silently she wept over me and enfolded me, as though shielding me with her broken wing. The wind carried them all away. They have all flown off, and I was left alone, alone. And something akin to the ending of a very ancient lamentation, and something akin to a prayer, a supplication and trembling, my ear heard in that silent weeping and in that tear boiling. So I mean, one could talk about this forever. It's like I think it's really full with a lot of the themes that I mentioned, and I've been talking and reading a lot. So I have some things to share, of course, but I would like to open it up first. If anybody, what comes up for you when we have these three themes of loneliness and grief and pain and intimacy? Anybody wants to say something? Yes. The Shekhinah. Yeah. Do people hear what people say in the audience? So there was this mention in the room. What's your name? Marshall said that that a lot of this, there are a lot of references to the Haskalah, to the Enlightenment movement, and that a lot of the yeshiva students have left, and the Beit Midrash is empty, and only the speaker is there together with God, with the Shekhinah. And from how you say it, I understand that you see it, that's positive. You were saying that's a good. It seemed to describe to you like a good thing. Yeah. So yes, so definitely. So Marshall was like saying, oh, the focus is also that Bialik is not throwing everything out. It's just that he is still making use of the values and turning it into literature, which I totally agree with, which is what he's doing in so many of his poems. I think he never left, he never walked away from the religion, and wrote completely secular poems that had no reference at all to Judaism. I think he needed probably to stay with it. And I think I see it is a beautiful intimate moment, and that is definitely what is going on here in terms of tenderness and intimacy, but it is very sad. It's especially the fourth and fifth stanzas, if you want to take a look at it, how he's describing how he feels that this place is very narrow, is too narrow for him, and he wants to go to the window, he wants to go to the light, the enlightenment, um, and this place is too narrow for him. And then the Shekhinah is is hiding her head on his shoulder and crying, and her tear falls on his Gemara page. And for me, it was just almost like a union of lovers who know that they have to part, and even the person who is the one who wants to walk away feels the grief, which is the speaker. Um, but it's this like super intimate moment, but it doesn't it it doesn't become a good moment in that. It is good because there's intimacy, but it is very sad because he's not going to stay, and they are not coming back. But yes, thank you for reading up on it in advance. That's yeah. Thank you. Yes. There is a hand up on Zoom. How do I do this? I what? Okay, the hand on Zoom. I'm being told. I'm sorry, I won't be able to hear you. So, right, we have to show. But yeah, no, for sure. So there was this comment. What's your name? David was commenting on how the search for spirituality in the loneliness caused by trauma is not unusual, and how we find it a lot, and definitely that is there. And it is interesting though also that both figures are lonely, right? So it is the speaker is lonely. The speaker is the one who is saying badad badad, and the levadi is actually when the Shekhinah is speaking. So there's a lot of loneliness and trying to seek and connect. Deborah. Yes, 1902. Presumably, yeah. That's it. Yeah, that's it. Everyone is gone, and the Shekhinah is alone in the Bet Midrash. I think he died while he was. I don't think he left. I think he died on a visit when he like yeah. I think yes, which is I think what his grief. What I find is that it's the loneliness of the Shekhinah is actually bigger in a way than I mean than the speakers, right? Because the speaker is like as I've been thinking about this a lot about in terms of of a separation where even the person who says who has made the decision to leave that they still feel a lot of pain um, and pain and empathy but mostly also grief and pain for that it's over and in this poem though even though he obviously then left but the poem it doesn't end it doesn't say and I left like I was reading when I was reading here what Tuvia Rubna writes about it is sort of undecided it's still open the way the poem ends yeah Rabbi Schatz. Oh yes. Right. That's yeah, that's amazing. So Rabbi Schatz was commenting for those of you on Zoom that of all the words that could have been used for God, the one name is Shekhinah that is always used as a partner to something to God. To it's always in partnership, whereas all the other words stand by themselves. So that does speak to the to the intimacy and tenderness, for sure. And Deborah earlier was mentioning about that he also left ultimately, that there is still this vacillation of being there, but then also leaving. Yes. Hmm. Yeah. Yeah, no, thank you. Also, to that, the ancient lament and the Shekhinah, what I found interesting is that there's this word that the only corner, like she's been like driven away from every corner, and she only found this one little hidden nook in the Ben Midrash, and it resonated, it echoes the four corners of the exile. That even from there she's been driven away, and now she's alone in the Ben Midrash. We are basically at 6:15. I do want to so two things that I think. First of all, thank you, everyone. I would love to continue talking with you about it. There's so much more to say, and each of you has brought a new aspect that I didn't think of it, so it's amazing. I just wanted to point out, which is probably didn't go unnoticed, why I chose this poem. I mean, I chose this poem because I like it, but also because it just fits in so well with our parsha. Because there's this reference, "Your only son" is there, and there are two other references. One is to Isaiah 49:20, is about this place is too narrow for me. When he says that, which is about that once redemption has come, the place is going to be too narrow. It's meant in a positive way, whereas Bialik turns it, at least the way I understand it, into something that feels restrained, which I interpreted it to be the religion, and then the other line is I will be with her in her trouble, echoes a line from Psalms. And it is interesting that the Tsarli is both trouble and narrow. So this is all used. The other thing, we're obviously not going to look at the second poem, but that was just brought as like a continuation of this because of two things. Because if we understand this being a union between the speaker and the Shekhinah that is being painfully dissolved, it is interesting to look at the other poem, which is really more of a love poem than a poem about spiritual quest or religious quests and inquiry. And obviously it is so often used in Jewish imagery and in biblical texts throughout. The wings of the Shekhinah, the shelter of God, and it's often used to express romantic union. So that I thought interesting also because it foreshadows Chaye Sarah, at least if we want to read it into it. Of course, he wasn't thinking of that, but because he's asking, be my mother, be to me like my mother and my sister. So he's speaking to the woman that he loves, and I thought it's a nice way to go into the week, thinking that in this parsha that is beginning very soon, Rivka is found and brought to Isaac and goes into the tent of Sarah, and then she's his mother and his sister. Steve has the last word. Pardon? Oh, wonderful. So there's an Arik Einstein song, as there are so many amazing Arik Einstein songs, that makes reference to Tachat Kanfea, under the wing of the Shekhinah. And it's easy to find, says Steve. Thank you so much. Thanks, everyone.
Does anybody want to lead us in Birkat? Someone who ate bread and can lead us in a Zimun? I'm happy to start Shir Hamala, and then you think about whether or not you ate bread and you can lead us. Shir Hamala Peshuva Adonai Et Shivat Zion Ayinu Kechomim Az Yemale Eschok Pinu Ushonenu Rina Az Yomru Vagoyim Hidil Adonai Lasoti Mele Hidil Adonai Lasoti Manu Ayinu Semechim Shuva Adonai Et Shevitenu Kafikim Negev Hazrohim Bedima Berina Yiktoru Halochelechu Vacho Nose Meshech Hazara Boyavo Yavo Verina Nose Alumotav Yeshua Merach Betave Adolam Baruch Eloheinu Shachanu Mishalav Tivah Chayinu. So I'm going to invite everyone to say Kaddish de Rabbanan. And as I find it, I just want to point out that anytime that poetry is brought to Temple Beth Am, I always think of Baruch Link, Dr. Baruch Link. And Julie, I know that you did not know him, but this would have done him so proud. He would have been so excited to be able to hear a student, specifically a rabbinical student, teach poetry with just such beauty and such connection to Torah. It makes me very happy to hear poetry brought back to this campus. And even though you did not do it in his name, I'm sure to many people here, when they hear Chaim Nahman Bialik, they think second of Dr. Baruch Link. So he definitely was present here with us as you taught really beautifully about one of his favorite poets. Kaddish de Rabbanan is on page 111. Yit Gadal Veyit Kadash Shemei Rabbah. בעלמא דברה חירותי וימליך מלכותי, בחייכון וביומכון ובחיי דכל בית ישראל, בעגלה ובזמן קריב ואמרו אמן. יהי שמי רבה מבורך לעולם לומי עלמיה. יתברך וישתבח ויתפאר ויתרומם ויתנשא, ויתהדר ויתעלה ויתהלל שמי דקודשה ברכו. לעילה מן כל ברכתה ושירתה, תושבחתה ונחמתה, דאמירן בעלמא ואמרו אמן. על ישראל ועל רבנן ועל תלמידיהון, ועל כל תלמידי תלמידיהון, ועל כל מן דעסקין באורייתא, די ואתרא הדין ודי וכל אתר ואתר. יהי להון ולכון שלמה רבה, חינה וחיסטה ורחמין, וחיין אריכין ומזונה רביחה, ופור קנה מן קודם אבוהון דבי שמיה ואמרו אמן. יהי שלמה רבה מן שמיה, וחיים טובים עלינו ועל כל ישראל ואמרו אמן. עושה שלום במרומיו, הוא ברחמיו יעשה שלום עלינו ועל כל ישראל ואמרו אמן. Isaac, would you like to lead us in Mariv? Mariv begins on page 264. If you're able to do so, please rise.
והוא רחום יכפר עוון ולא ישחית ועיר ולא ישיב אפו ולא ירא כל חמתו. אדוני הושיע, המלך יעננו ביום קרינו. ברכו את אדוני המבורך. ברוך אדוני המבורך לעולם ועד. ברוך אתה אדוני. ומעביר יום ובין לילה, ומבדיל בין יום ובין לילה, אדוני צבאות שמו, אל חי וקיים תמיד ימלוך עלינו לעולם ועד. ברוך אתה אדוני, המעריב הרבים. כי הם חיינו ואורך ימינו, ובהם נגיד יומם ולילה, ואהבתך אל תסתיר ממנו לעולמים. ברוך אתה אדוני, אוהב עמו ישראל. שמע ישראל, אדוני אלוהינו, אדוני אחד. אדוני אלוהיכם אמת, ואמונה כל זאת ויאמן. ומלכותו ברצון קיבלו עליהם משה ומרים בני ישראל לכאן ושירה בשמחה רבה ואמרו כולם מי כמוך בעלים אדוני מי כמוך נדר בקודש נורא תהילות אוסף אלה מלכותך ראו בניך בוקר ים לפני משה זה לי ענו ואמרו אדוני ימלוך לעולם ועד, ונאמר כי פדה אדוני את יעקב, וגאלו מיד חזק ממנו, ברוך אתה אדוני גאל ישראל, השכיבנו אדוני אלוהינו את עוננו. ושמור צאתנו ובאנו לחיים ולשלום מעתה ועד עולם, ברוך אתה אדוני שומר עמו ישראל לעד. כי המלכות שלך היא אומרת ואת תמלוך בכבוד, כי אין לנו מלך אלא אתה, ברוך אתה אדוני המלך בכבודו תמיד ימלוך עלינו לעולם ועד ועל כל מעשיו. יתגדל ויתקדש שמי רבה, בעלמא דברה חירותי וימליך מלכותי בחייכון ובמכון וחיי דכל בית ישראל בעגלה ובזמן קריב אמרו אמן. יהי שמי רבה מבורך לעולמי מעלמיה, יתברך וישתבח ויתפאר ויתרומה ויתנשא ויתהדר ויתעלה ויתהלל שמי דקודשה בריחו לעין לה מן כל ברכתה ושירתה תושבחתה ברחמת אדם אילן בעלמא ואמרו אמן. יתגדל ויתקדש שמי רבה, בעלמא דברה חירותי וימליך מלכותי בחייכון ובמכון וחיי לכל בית ישראל בעגלה ובזמן קריב אמרו אמן. יהי שמי רבה מברך ומיה יתברך וישתבח ויתפאר ויתרומם ויתנשא ויתהדר ויתהלל ויתהלל שמי דקודשה בריחו לאין לה מן כל ברכתה ושירתה תושבחתה ונחמתה דאמירן בעלמא ואמרו אמן. ויהי נועם אדוני אלוהינו עלינו יושב בסתר עליון. יקראני ואיננו עמו אנוכי בצרה אכלסהו ואכדהו אורך ימים אשביעהו ויראהו בשועתי אורך ימים אשביעהו ויראהו בשועתי. יתגדל ויתקדש שמי רבה בעלמא דברה חירותי וימליך מלכותי בחייכון ובמכון ובחיי לכל בית ישראל בעגלה ובזמן קריב ואמרו אמן. יהי שמי רבה מבורך לעולם לעולמי עלמיה יתברך וישתבח ויתפאר ויתרומם ויתנשא ויתהדר ויתהלל ויתהלל שמי דקודשה בריחו לאין לה מן כל ברכתה ושירתה תושבחתה ונחמתה דאמירן בעלמא ואמרו אמן. תתקבל צלבות ההון ודהון תכל ישראל כאדם עבדי וישמעיה ואמרו אמן. יהי שלום רבה מן שמעיה וחיים עלינו ועל כל ישראל ואמרו אמן. עושה שלום במרומיו הוא יעשה שלום ועל כל ישראל ואמרו אמן. עלינו לשבח לאדון הכל לתת גדולה ליוצר בראשית שלא עשנו כגויי הארצות ולא שמנו כמשפחות האדמה שלא שם חלקנו כהם וגורלנו ככל עמונם ואנחנו קוראים ומשתחווים ומודים לפני מלך מלכי המלכים הקדוש ברוך הוא. שעונות השמיים ככתוב בתורתך אדוני ימלוך לעולם ועד ונאמר והיה אדוני למלך על כל הארץ ביום ההוא יהיה אדוני אחד ושמו אחד. יתגדל ויתקדש שמי רבה בעלמא דברה חירותי וימליך מלכותי בחייכון וביומכון ובחיי דכל בית ישראל בעגלה ובזמן קריב ואמרו אמן. יהי שמי רבה מבורך לעולם ולעלמי עלמיה יתברך וישתבח ויתפאר ויתרומם ויתנשא ויתהדר ויתהלל ויתהלל שמי דקודשה בריחו לאין לה מן כל ברכתה ושירתה תושבחתה ונחמתה דאמירן בעלמא ואמרו אמן. יהי שלמה רבה מן שמעיה וחיים עלינו ועל כל ישראל ואמרו אמן. עושה שלום במרומיו הוא יעשה שלום עלינו ועל כל ישראל ואמרו אמן.
So this is the moment, just like at a Shabbat dinner, where you know that the food is coming, but the rabbi gets up and gives 6 minutes of announcements. So we can't do Havdallah for another 5 minutes. I'm not going to give you announcements. I don't have that many announcements to give you. But maybe Julia will read the second poem to us, since we didn't get to hear the second poem. Is that okay with you? Okay. Just to put her on the spot. It's what interns are for, right? And also, I just want to let everybody know, this is one announcement that I have. Rabbi Kligfeld this morning gave a sermon on the Handmaid's Tale and how we read it, or how we read the Torah through that modern interpretation of a dystopian society. I will be teaching a class for the next 2 weeks that goes deeply into the characters that he mentioned. So this week will be on Hagar, and then the week following will be on Bilhah and Zilpah. So if you are interested in the class, I suggest that as soon as the sermon comes out on YouTube, that you watch it, just because it's a good introduction into the class that I will be teaching. And I hope that you join us. And then he and I will do a joint teaching on November, I believe it's the 23rd, whatever that Shabbat is, following the class. Oh, that was a very big bug. Following the class that I teach, and obviously the sermon that he gave this morning. So, Julia, if it's okay with you, we'll read the second poem just as a kind of a nice nightcap, and then we will do Havdallah in 3 minutes. Well, 5 minutes, really.
I am going to read this in English. Take me under your wing. Take me under your wing. Be my mother, my sister. Take my head to your breast, my banished prayers to your nest. One merciful twilight hour, hear my pain, bend your head. They say there's youth in the world. Where has my youth fled? Listen, another secret. I have been seared by a flame. They say there is love in the world. How do we know love's name? I was deceived by the stars. There was a dream, it passed. I have nothing at all in the world. I have nothing. Take me under your wing. Be my mother, my sister. Take my head to your breast, my banished prayers to your nest. In light of what we talked about just previously, I was thinking how it struck. I mean, I didn't. The banished prayers. I thought it was very interesting. Tifilotai hanidachot. I was just like curious if that like resonates with any one of you in light of the situation that we were envisioning earlier about the speaker and the Shekhinah and the Bint Midrash, and how there's this, he's like torn between wanting to leave but feeling so much grief about it. That's one thing that that stands out to me, and also really again sort of like how there's so much loneliness and isolation, and how he turns to what in this poem is most likely like more of a like actual a woman, a lover, but again with his background and using all these the words of take me under your wing, one cannot not think of this also as having this other layer. So I think it echoes a lot of what we saw in the previous poem. Steve, and then what? Under her broken wing, like in the other poem, it was the broken wing, which is a little detail that I wanted to mention too. Thank you. Yeah, I like that. I'm not sure when he wrote this poem, but it goes well. It flows well together with these two. Yeah, I'm not sure. Were you just scratching you, or did you say something, Bob? Okay. Do you have something? Pardon? Plural. I think that question goes to you, Rabbi.
Okay. Yeah, just the idea that the Shekhinah is an aspect of God that we don't think of as a singular aspect. Often it's kind of defined as the feminine aspect of God, which assumes that there's a masculine aspect of God. Often it's seen as in partnership, like we talk about the Shekhinah as dwelling at a wedding or at a bris. It's very relational. It's a very relational aspect of God, as opposed to when we just name God in the tetragrammaton of Adonai, or whether we say El. We're supposed to obviously believe that that is just one God. Without there are ways in which we believe that God has relationship with people or with angels or what have you, but the Shekhinah really is found and is conjured up in moments of relationship. So that's what I was pointing out. Okay, this brings us to Havdallah. Awesome. Good teamwork. Okay. um, exactly. All right. So if you want to come close, you can. Feel free to stay as far as you are comfortable. But we will do Havdalah together, and hopefully the wind will not make this super hard. Okay. I don't think it has so much to do with the size of the candle. That's okay. I just need the wind to stop if that's something you can make happen. Okay, there we go. Got it. Okay. הנה אל ישועתי, אפתח ולא אפחד, כי עוזי וזמרתיה, אדוני ויהי לי לישועה, ושפתם מים בששון, ממעייני הישועה, לאדוני הישועה, על עמך ברכתך סלה, אדוני צבאות עמנו. משגב לנו אלוהי יעקב סלה, אדוני צבאות, אשרי אדם בוטח בך, אדוני הושיע, המלך יעננו ויום קורנו ליהודים. הייתה אורה ושמחה וששון ויקר כן תהיה לנו, כוס ישועות אשא ובשם אדוני אקרא, יין עיני יין עיני עיני יין עיני יין עיני עיני. ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו מלך העולם, בורא פרי הגפן. ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו מלך העולם, בורא מיני ושמים. ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו מלך העולם, בורא מאורי האש. ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו מלך העולם, המבדיל בין קודש לחול, בין אור לחושך, בין ישראל לעמים, בין יום השביעי לששת ימי המעשה. ברוך אתה אדוני המבדיל בין קודש לחול. המבדיל בין קודש לחול, חטאותינו ימחו, זרענו וכספנו ירבה ירבה כחול וככוכבים בלילה. זרענו וכספנו ירבה ירבה כחול ככוכבים בלילה. שבוע טוב, 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 שבוע טוב. Eliyahu Hanavi, I can sing you out. Eliyahu Hatishvi, Eliyahu, Eliyahu, Eliyahu Agiladi Bimhera Veyamenu, Yavo Elenu, Mashiach ben David, Mashiach ben David. Shavua Tov, everyone. So lovely to be with you, and Yasher Koch again to Julie for leading us in a beautiful teaching.